And hello again. Welcome back, and welcome to those of you joining us for the first time. Very excited to introduce our next session, which is a panel discussion exploring how charities can make the most of social media fundraising, and is kindly supported by our partner Fundraising. The panel is going to be moderated by our very own Jonathan Chevalier, CEO of Charity Digital, as well as Jess from British Red Cross, Chiara creates from Sands, and Victoria Reid from Fundraising. Before handing over to Jonathan and the rest of the panel, just a reminder that all sessions are being recorded, will be available as well as any other links of resources. Closed captions are available. They should be at the bottom right of your screen. And if you have any question for our panelists, please pop them in the Q&A section, and Jonathan and the panelists will answer them in the 5 to 10 remaining minutes of the hour. If you encounter any sound or image issue, please do let us know in the chat section, and we'll do our very best to get back to normal. Without further ado, let me hand over to Jonathan and our panel. Welcome.
Thanks, Lisa. Yes, as Lisa says, I'm Jonathan Chevalier. I'm a white male, middle-aged, with a blue Charity Digital t-shirt, and I'm really excited to be chairing this panel because I think it's a fascinating subject that we're exploring today, the role of social media in particular. And we're going to have a real focus in this session on really virtual events as well. And in terms of the strong panel, just to recap, first of all, we've got Jess Burden. Jess is the virtual events manager at British Red Cross and has 10 years experience in fundraising at the Red Cross, and before that, Action for ME.
Hello. Yes.
Next, we have Victoria Creeds. Victoria is digital fundraising manager at Sands, which is a charity saving babies' lives and supporting bereaved families. Victoria's been involved in events there since 2020.
I think that's about me, but I'm Chiara. But
Sorry.
the description was correct for me, so that's me. I'm Chiara, and I work at Sands.
Sorry, that was an error in my background notes, which is super annoying. Apologies for that. And finally, we have the real Victoria, Victoria Reid, Senior Customer Success Manager at Funraisin, which, for those of you who don't know, is an advanced fundraising platform for charities. It specialises in events, community fundraising and appeals. And before Fundraising, Victoria worked in event fundraising at Asthma UK and the British Lung Foundation.
Hi everyone, really happy to be here. For those with vision impairment, I'm a 31-year-old white woman, blonde hair and green top.
Right, let's move into the contents of today. So the concept of social fundraising, and in particular virtual events, really came of age, I think we'd all say, in 2020, when it was estimated that revenues increased, I think something like fourfold, so a massive increase in revenue at that time. And there's some talk of that bubble having burst now. So I'm really interested to actually explore the reality of where social fundraising and virtual events are today. Before I go to questions, so I've got a few that are pre-prepared, but we've got plenty of time for audience questions as well. And so I just want to kind of highlight how you raise a question if you don't know. So basically there's a Q&A button on your screen. If you're on a PC, this is probably on the right hand side of your screen. And if you're on a mobile device, it's probably above the video image. So you just click on this Q&A button and then you can type in your question. You're also able to upvote other questions by clicking on the thumb icon beside it. So that way we can kind of identify if there are really key areas that people want to focus in on when you upvote them. So I want to start with a little bit of understanding the history for each of your organisations. So start with you, Chiara. How did Sands first get involved in social giving and virtual events?
It's quite an unusual one for us because Sands is quite unique in that until this year we didn't really have an IG team. And for many non-profits, obviously IG tends to be the foundations of fundraising that obviously other income streams then stem from. But that wasn't the case for Sands. And prior to the pandemic, kind of third-party events like the London Marathon and the Great North Run were the kind of biggest source of fundraising income for Sands. So when the pandemic hit, obviously it was a huge concern for all charities, but particularly for Sands when there were no in-person events going ahead. With that being such a huge part of our kind of fundraising budget. So in October of that year, well, in September actually, we launched our first ever virtual challenge with the support of an amazing agency called GYSS. And that challenge was 310,000 steps in October. So it's kind of one of the classic virtual challenges that you'll see. And it was a crazy time. We had a £3,000 media budget, which we put behind Facebook ads. And ended up raising over £700,000, which was just, phenomenal. Really, really crazy. Since then, we've gone on to build our portfolio of virtual challenges. So we now run between kind of 10 to 15 challenges per year, and have definitely seen this kind of develop into a sustainable income stream for us. So not quite the same ROIs as that first challenge, but definitely a more kind of sustainable approach to virtual challenges.
Brilliant. And Jess, how did the British Red Cross first get involved?
Quite a while before a lot of the boom period, actually. So Mars Refugees, which is the main event that I lead on, started with a very quick pilot in 2017. It comes from our internal development team, who have just changed their name recently, so I'm forgetting what they're called. But we have our own innovations team who come up with events, and they came up with Mars in 2017. Mars Refugees raises money specifically for our refugee work. We have such a wide variety of work as a charity that it's dedicated to one part of that. So it is a restricted fund campaign. And the idea is you choose one of 6 distances, each of which represents a common migration route. The English Channel at 22 miles. We had a Ukraine to Poland one that we started in 2021, for instance. So it's a really clear link between the cause and the event. Obviously, these routes, we can't be running in-person events. They are, by their very nature, dangerous routes. And so the virtual one was a good fit for that, to do it symbolically instead, wherever people are in the UK. And we had 2017 as an initial pilot, raising a couple of thousand with very little outlay just to test the idea. 2018, we then had the prototype. 2019, a formal pilot, and then it absolutely blew up in 2020 as this established event during a period of lockdown, raising over £1 million. And it's then we had, with the new Ukraine to Russia route, another big boost in 2021, and it has been trending down since then as an older event. So we're now working to change it into more of a stable, always available, rather than just doing it as one big month promotion. We're changing it to an always available event that we can just sell to people year round who want it as a way to support specifically our refugee work.
Brilliant. Thank you. And Victoria, how did you first get involved?
Very similar story to these guys. So as you said, in my previous life, I was an events fundraiser in a charity. So I started dabbling in virtual events in 2018, very small minimum viable product that we built year on year. And then shockingly, 2020 was also a big year for us. So that was a way for the charity I worked at the time, Asper Young UK, to really protect income, given that all those typical streams of income like London Marathon, Great North Run, etc., weren't available anymore. And very similar to these guys, it had a massive boom when people were at home and needed something to do, and the focus was very much on the third sector and how people could help at such a difficult time. And since moving to fundraising, virtual events is one way that fundraising can support charities to raise lots of money. We're seeing an increasing number of charities come to us with their virtual and social giving, really want to take more control over that and have more ownership of their brand and the experience that a supporter gets.
Brilliant, thank you. So let's sort of kind of come a little bit more up to date now, and I know you've already touched a little bit on it, Jess, but I'm really interested in how important social fundraising and virtual events is to your charity today. Maybe start again with you, Jess.
Yeah, Candy. So virtual fundraising is becoming less important. We are leading more on developing in-person events at the moment. This is partly because we're seeing CPAs going up as more and more of these events are entered. We're also seeing competition for fitness challenge events from for-profit companies, the Conqueror Challenge or the Conqueror Series, for instance. You just buy the medal to take part. So that's affecting CPAs on our virtual events, but also we're seeing a real desire for in-person events from people that want to come together and have these fun experiences, which counts as social fundraising. So as the other one of social media, much as virtual events are trending down, what we've learned from virtual events, we are now moving into our in-person events. This part of really making sure we're emphasizing user-generated content on platforms like TikTok. We're having selfie frames at all of our in-person events. And we're emphasizing different ways that we've used to promote our virtual events as ways people can promote their fundraising pages, because they are social fundraising. Everyone who has an online Just Giving page is using social fundraising techniques. They may not have a budget behind it, but just as we want to get these posts up on our British Red Cross Instagram, we need them to share it on theirs. So a lot of the things we're learning from virtual events have really transformed how we approach in-person events, even if virtual events themselves are trending down in importance within our events portfolio.
Yeah, really good points there. How about Chiara? How about at Sands?
So at Sands, I guess it's a little different to what Jess is experiencing. So whilst we are seeing that growth in in-person events, we're actually still seeing a lot of success with our virtual challenges. So for us, they represent this year representing 36% of our overall kind of fundraising income. So still a huge percentage of our income accounted for by virtual challenges, and they are the single biggest income stream within our budget. So we're kind of still seeing a lot of success with them. And I guess kind of outside of the income value attached to fundraising events, we're kind of understanding the value that the acquisition of all these new people to our charity is bringing us. Particularly with our, as I've mentioned, our new IG team, we're kind of working on developing onward journeys for both the supporters who've signed up and fundraised, working out, what is the next best ask for them, but also for those leads who don't go on to fundraise for us, working out how we can engage them and what ask would be best placed to get them to engage with us and ultimately raise funds for us as a charity.
Yeah, good. So Victoria, you work supplier side, so you are seeing what's happening across lots and lots of different charities. So I'm interested in what you're seeing in terms of the reality today.
It's a very interesting picture. I would say generally we are tending to see more virtual campaigns coming to us, a lot more charities, if not continuing to stay in that space, really enter that space. A lot of them also just rethinking about how they work their virtual and social media giving models. Because I really like the point that Jess made about the way you run a virtual campaign can actually really influence how you would run a third-party campaign. And we really find that the charities that are having a huge amount of success recognize those universal fundraising principles that, when you focus on supporter experience, when you focus on putting your brand and your cause front and center, when you have like complete ownership of all the data and all the tracking, it can really elevate any element of the portfolio. But particularly with virtual, it's a great way to connect with people who you might not otherwise connect with. I'm particularly interested to see charities using virtuals as, yes, a way to keep their warm base really engaged and close to them and give them that repeat feeling of warm and fuzzy every year, but it's also a really strong cold acquisition method for a lot of charities still to this day. So lots of charities doing very clever things to manage those two different cohorts, give them different experiences. But generally, yeah, we're seeing that virtual is very much here to stay, and if actually, you know, maybe just getting even bigger as time goes on.
Yeah. So going back to you, Chiara, I'm interested in what's changed since the boom years of the pandemic.
Yeah, so I guess as I mentioned, we're not seeing the same ROI as we did in 2020 and 2021. But actually, that's not a concern for us because we're kind of seeing the income stream stabilise and kind of become more sustainable. But we are finding that we need to be smarter with those challenges. And I guess the first thing really off the bat is finding the right challenge, the right proposition for your audience. So back in 2020, you know, people were bored. There wasn't, you know, anything. People didn't have anything to do to fill their time. So we saw kind of all these crazy challenges pop up and do really well. They were kind of like burpee challenges, craft challenges. I don't know, you name it, it was out there, and they were doing really well because people were, you know, they were locked in their houses and they were looking for stuff to do, and they were engaging in whatever you were sending them to read and to do. And actually for us as a charity since then, we've had to really think cleverly about what the challenge actually is and what we're asking our supporters to do. For us, the majority of our supporters are looking to do something in memory of a baby, so that the activities that are working for our audience are the ones that offer people the time and space to reflect and to remember and to often to do something together with other people to honour a baby. So picking challenges and propositions that enable that has become really, really important for us, compared to say back in 2020 when it kind of didn't really matter what we were asking people to do because they were going to do it anyway. And I guess linked to that, the communications then have to be better, more personalised, more bespoke, because again, back in 2020, people would read whatever because they had the time to do so. Whereas now we're needing to be really targeted. We're needing to use kind of triggered communications based on the specific activities of the individual. So whether that be when they get their first donation or when they hit a fundraising target or when they log physical activity, our journeys are so much more advanced than they were back in 2020 in an attempt to engage people in the best way we can.
Yes, and Jess, what are you seeing as different since those boom years?
I feel like I'm about to copy the answer before, to be honest, in a lot of this. I think one of the big things that's changed is obviously a lot more competition and higher expectations from people who might have taken part in previous events before. They expect a lot more from a sports journey and other things. But yeah, I think the biggest change is that we're working from data now, from past experience, and whether that is helping us better tailor events or helping us make an argument for new events internally, we're able to point now to years of data of the value of the acquisition of our supporters. Some people have taken part in Miles Refugees across multiple years, or they've taken part once and they've done other things for us. They've run a marathon, they've set up a regular giving thing, they've given to an appeal. So we are able to argue for acquisition and other things with data now far more than we were before. And like Chiara said, we're far more able to decide what the most effective events are likely to be for our audience. And there has been a real trend towards runs, walks, and seeing a lot of swims in the last 2 years as well. But yeah, definite tightening of the kinds of virtual challenges that are out there. So yeah, I'd say that's been the biggest change, is we're working from a point of understanding rather than piloting and testing like we were more in 2020.
Yeah, brilliant. Victoria, anything you'd add?
Yeah, I mean, well, similar to what these guys have already said, it's that nuance element now that's come in. It was lovely back in the day of the pandemic where it could be a little more launch and leave, that, you know, you put something out there, people want to do it. Lovely. You know, there was still an element of nurture there, but broadly it worked as expected within the model. Now it's very much about being reactive. So yes, put stuff out there that, as these guys said, know that it's going to work for your audience. But we're noticing that charities really have to then not take a backseat. They still need to be in that data day to day, making tweaks, as they go along, really fine-tuning and optimizing what they're doing. And actually, just a big change that's happened since 2020 is generally throughout tech platforms across the globe. You know, Facebook was really huge back in the day, but Instagram was on the rise. It still continues to be. People are still using Twitter/X, you know, and now TikTok is around and really dominant as well. So the big change that we can see is that actually charity audiences don't just exist primarily on one platform anymore. They exist across the spectrum of all the different platforms, a lot of the time on multiple platforms at once, which can be a challenge because there's more places to go and find people. But at the same time, it opens up a lot of doors of opportunities to, you know, spread your net, go and see who else is out there. So that's been a big shift.
Yeah, yeah, brilliant. So we're going to open up to the floor for questions in a minute. I can see they're starting to come in now, but do please add more in. Quick question before we go to the floor. So what's the biggest lesson you've learned about social media fundraising or virtual events in 2024? Maybe start with Jess on this one.
It gives you a better chance to reach more niche audiences, which is an opportunity for virtual events, which are often far cheaper to run themselves rather than the big events. We're doing, for instance, a walk series at the moment. So, of course, the outlay of that means we need a super broad audience. We need it to be available to everyone. Whereas with Mars for Refugees, to make sure we're not then competing with ourselves while promoting two events, we're promoting our higher distance events, our Tunisia to Italy distance, which is 280 miles in a month. And we're going after triathletes who like the fact that you can do it any way you want. So one of the big learnings is there's an option to step outside of what I'd imagine is a very familiar audience group for people here, women in large urban centres aged 18 to 45. But if you're running an event for less money, there is an opportunity to get more niche, and social media really gives you a chance to do that.
Yeah. Chiara?
My lesson really touches on what Victoria was just talking about, which is kind of the need to be flexible during kind of a challenge period and having the ability to change from your plan or how you thought things would go actually mid-challenge. So for a challenge we ran in September, we typically when we run a challenge we would set kind of, we're going to spend 10% of our media budget on Instagram, we're going to spend 5% on Twitter, we're going to spend the rest on Facebook, and we kind of wouldn't really diverge too much from what we'd set out in our plan. In September, we spent 69% of our media budget on Facebook ads. But when it came to looking at the data, we realised we actually only got 50% of our income came from those Facebook leads. So a lesson for us really is that looking forward, we need to be delving into that data during that acquisition period, which sounds obvious, but in the depth of a challenge, it can be hard to find the time to do that. But actually, I think there's so much value to be found in doing that and being flexible with that budget and moving it across platforms, dependent on where you see that average value being high and that activation being high.
Yes. And Victoria?
Yeah, lovely to hear that. Yeah.
You probably see a different view because you see lots of organisations. So what have you learned?
We do, yeah. From the dark side, the view is very much, well, I really love what Chiara said, that example. Like, we actually work with Chiara and Sans on a lot of their virtual challenges, and it is that measurement and tracking aspect. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So it's great to see all the tests, the variety out there, but it's really crucial that you can actually monitor, okay, but what is actually bringing in money? So everyone's conscious of budgets and ROI. Yeah, really do all you can to make sure that you can follow something all the way to the end so that you can see, okay, that looked lovely engagement wide, but actually this is what brought us in the bulk of our income. That's really important to measure it. And also, if I could do a reminder to everyone, because I know I'm guilty of this whenever I'm testing sites, please look at mobile first, because the world is becoming more and more mobile focused. We see on average like 82% of donations coming via mobile throughout all our platforms. So whenever you're testing, make sure it looks as good on a mobile as it does on desktop. And if it needs to look different on mobile to desktop, that's great. Give them a different experience. That's totally fine.
Okay, thanks. So let's go now to questions coming in from the floor. So this is one from Julia, and it's been upvoted by a couple of people as well. So there's obviously a lot of enthusiasm for this one. So in terms of digital fundraising, what do you think might replace the apparently waning trend for virtual challenges? And I think that apparently word is an interesting one to explore. Maybe start with you on this, Victoria.
That's the hard ball straight out the gate. Well, you know, from our perspective, I think you're right. Like, apparently it's kind of in air quotes for me, because we actually see that it's not waning. I think it's being more strategic if you want to keep offering that virtual element in your portfolio. So exactly like the lovely examples that Chiara and Jess gave, like having campaigns that work for your audience, but also connect beautifully to your cause, like walking the length of a refugee route, doing a kind of sponsored virtual walk, which also gives you time to reflect if it's a bereavement charity. Like, it's finding that kind of synergy between those. God, I hate synergy, but you know, that connection between, you know, like, it's great for me as an individual, as this fundraising audience member, but it's also lovely because I feel like I'm getting a closer connection to the cause. So yeah, we really don't see that they're going anywhere. In fact, for, you know, some charities like SANS, they're getting bigger and bigger all the time.
And it's probably good to go to Chiara at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I would echo Victoria. For us, we're not seeing that downward trend, and I think actually what is maybe being perceived as a downward trend is actually just this income stream stabilizing and becoming more secure with time, and us not experiencing the highs but also like extreme lows of challenges that we had back in 2020. So yes, we had, you know, some amazing challenges that performed really, really well, but we did have ideas that absolutely flopped. I think that's, you know, we definitely took the approach at SANS that was okay, because we were testing and learning from all of those challenges. And that's kind of, I think, what's led us to be in this strong position now, that we've not been afraid to test. And when something has failed, we've not seen that as, oh my God, virtual challenges aren't working anymore. But actually, we got something wrong there that meant it didn't work. So whether that was the proposition or the journey, or whatever it was, there was clearly something wrong. And it wasn't that the digital challenges market just wasn't there. It was just that we needed to change something.
Yeah. And Jess, you've already touched a little bit on this, but I guess if you'd kind of mind expanding a little bit more.
I think it's definitely true that virtual events are stabilizing. So I think it's going to be something that's just a part of your day-to-day, one of your income streams, along with all your other ones, your raffles and other things that maybe aren't the shiny new thing bringing in millions anymore, but they are definitely a key part of your fundraising. If I might suggest what might be the next shiny thing that could potentially bring in millions, I'm going to shout out my colleague in my team who does gaming and streaming. And a lot of what we've learned from virtual events, you know, I'm talking to him about, we've tried some streams for people taking part in Mars to get that engagement going. We're looking at new fun ways people do it, setting incentives for their audience, saying if we get to 5,000, I'll dress as a lobster on stream or something. So other ways people can start fundraising coming from this new thing. So that's what my suggestion would be.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Jess. And I'm just going to make a quick plug, because we did actually earlier on today have a panel on fundraising through gaming. So if you didn't make it to that session, the recording for that will be live. It might not be live yet, but it will be soon if it isn't. So just drop in and consume that. And yeah, we've got the answer to the question covered in more detail there. Let's go to the next one. So this is from Carl. So what would your top 3 tips or key considerations be for someone developing their first virtual event? And Carl's viewing this as a test and learn exercise. Maybe start with Chiara on this one.
I think if you are coming from a nonprofit that's never run a virtual challenge before, I think the key would be to keep it really, really simple. So think really carefully about that proposition. But like Jess mentioned earlier, a huge number of charities have seen a lot of success with walks, runs and swims in the last 2 years. So as long as that seems like it would be a natural fit for who who you know your audience to be, then I would stick with like a really simple proposition, and then I would stick to a really, really simple journey. Again, there's lots of charities running virtual challenges, so Secret Shop, sign up to some of their challenges, look at the journey that takes the supporter, that takes you as your secret shopper from the ad to the position where you're within a fundraising page. And from looking at all the different charities, pick a journey that seems the simplest. Every audience, no matter your audience, everybody wants a simple journey to avoid that drop off. And then once you've got that kind of basic journey, map out the A/B tests that you can do as part of that journey to see actually specifically what works best for your audience, because nobody else and no other charity will know that, so you will need to test that bit yourself.
Yeah, good. Now, Jess, you might not have 3, given that Chiara's already given quite a few, but do you have anything to add to that?
It's fine. I'd like to second everything she said. I'll try and add another one. And the absolute key one I have is make sure you source a good platform first. I'm sure Victoria's going to agree with me on this one. But these are supposed to be easy to launch, easy to test events. And if you get the wrong platform, they are absolutely not. I can tell you that. They can be the worst nightmare to run if you don't have a good and easy to use digital platform. So make sure that you can sort your platform so that you're not tearing your hair out trying to provide a good experience for people. Also be realistic in your expectations, particularly this goes for any test, not just a virtual event. And also there's a lot of figures out there of big income from virtual events that people still look to from 2020 and 2021, and these need to be moved on from. Miles was £1 million fundraiser when everyone was locked in their house. It is not going to be in 2025. You just need to acknowledge that there were certain years, if you're looking at virtual event data, that are not coming back, and for 2020 I think that's overall a good thing in almost everything other than virtual events income. But other than that, I'd say have a good follow-on journey sorted. And again, this is something for any event, but you've put all this effort into recruiting people, and it might be a very different audience than you've had. Our virtual event audience trends a lot younger than our general audience across our CRM. So yeah, make sure that you've got something that you can offer them so that they stick around and you can really see the advantage of that event and the brilliant experience you've given them.
Anything to add, Victoria?
I third everything everyone's just said. Yeah, they're all fantastic points. These guys really know what they're doing. Yeah, just to reassert, don't try and reinvent the wheel. I know it feels like everyone's doing the same thing, and some people interpret that by trying to create something really complex and intricate and really niche, and which it's a lovely show of creativity, but actually I wouldn't stress too much about that. Ultimately, it's okay if everyone's doing a walk 100k in a month or do 20 skips a day. What's important is that it's relevant to your cause and it's relevant to the audience that you're trying to attract. It should always be audience and fundraising ability first.
Yeah, thank you. Let's go to the next question. So this is from Keith, and Keith is asking, how do you see the traditional Facebook challenges as different to virtual and social giving? And if there is a difference, what's changed and what's working and not working? Start with you, Victoria.
Oh, another tough one. They are different. We actually had a gathering of charities in our office yesterday talking about virtual challenges, and we were talking about that nuance between Facebook challenges and website challenges, if you like. So they're still virtual challenges, but they're not happening on Facebook in that traditional Facebook challenge model. And they are very different realistically. When it was that traditional Facebook challenge model, you get some leads in, you put them in a group, you send them a link to register, they then start fundraising on Facebook. It's not to say that doesn't work now at all, but the difference with website fundraising is that they're fundraising for you, with you, on your platform. It's very much your cause first. It's not Facebook first. And I think also to go back to what I said earlier, you know, there's still a lot of power in Meta and Facebook. It's a great acquisition channel. We always encourage our charities when they're doing virtual journeys to still have a Facebook group going on the side where people can chat, share user-generated content. You can run incentives and competitions in there. But realistically, people aren't only on Facebook. And if you're going to give them the option to only create their fundraiser on Facebook, realistically, that's not going to work for a lot of people. I know I still have Facebook, so I can occasionally, you know, snoop on what people are up to and stay in certain groups about house parties, but, you know, I'm not going to set up a Facebook fundraiser. That's just not where my peers are anymore. So it's in many ways easier when it comes to website fundraising because you open a lot more doors and a lot more opportunity to get a broader range of fundraisers in. Yeah, it's a very, very different world.
Yes. Now, Chiara, I think when we were chatting a couple of days ago, you were saying you have used Facebook. So interested in how you answer this question.
Yeah, definitely. So for me, virtual challenges are kind of an evolution of that Facebook challenge. So, and the reason that they've evolved so much is because we're finding audiences across other social platforms. So typically we were marketing our challenges on Facebook and then directing those people through to a Facebook group, and they were setting up Facebook fundraisers, and like Victoria touched on, it was very Facebook centric. But actually we know that we've got huge audiences who aren't using Facebook anymore. And even if, like Victoria says, they've got a Facebook account, that doesn't mean that they want to be sharing they don't want to be sharing their challenge on Facebook. I think that's quite so for us as a charity, for example, there's quite an obvious reason behind that, and it's that baby loss can be quite a taboo subject. So actually, for many of our supporters, having the control over who they're sharing their fundraising link with and who they're sharing their story with, and having the control to share via, to share their website fundraising link via a channel that they feel comfortable with, I think is really important. As I touched on earlier, when I was talking about flexibility with the budget, we are seeing, huge success in gaining fundraisers from other social platforms. So on our September challenge, these figures are just from the top of my head, but I think the cost per registration, so not cost per lead, but the cost per somebody actually registering to take part in the challenge, was about a quarter for those who came through our TikTok ad campaign compared to our Facebook ad campaign. So we were, seeing a much, much, much stronger result from our TikTok ad campaign. And I guess that is, for us, one of the driving factors behind moving away from solely a Facebook challenge.
Good. Jess, do you have anything to add to this one?
I don't. We don't do Facebook challenges, so I have nothing at all to add, unless you can learn something from that, I guess.
Yes, I'm going to pick up actually on platforms in a minute because I think it's quite an interesting area. But there's a kind of a supplementary Facebook question that I want to cover off first. So this is from Nikki saying, if we were to throw a bit of budget at Facebook advertising in order to fundraise, what types of fundraising asks land best in your view? What would you say, Victoria?
Well, it depends who you're targeting. It's, from our perspective, it should always be audience first, and the asks can come off the back of that. So, if you're asking people who, have, maybe don't have a load of time to offer you, maybe a simple straight donation ask would work better. If you are actually asking people to commit time as well as money, they might need to be a lot more engaged. Okay, maybe we can go off with an event or a community offering for them. Really, the key is, as I know that people talk a lot about activities when it comes to virtual, like will a swimming challenge work, will a running challenge work, etc., etc. Really, for me, the primary thing should always be the motivation of that audience. So are they looking to kind of have that public acknowledgement that I'm a really good person and look at me and I'm quite competitive and I want to reach the top of that leaderboard? Or are they wanting to do something where they feel part of a philanthropic community all coming together and want that sense of unity. All those motivations of all your different fundraisers are going to be very different, and the activity or donation method you offer them should reflect that, like reflect their motivation and reflect what they're going to feel most comfortable doing. So I would say think about your audience who's most likely to give you money first, find where they are, and then decide what ask you're going to follow up with.
Brilliant. Anything to add, Chiara?
I was just going to say, I think ultimately it depends what you want the people to do. And I think that's maybe what we're missing from that question. Our IG team have just run a campaign where they weren't actually asking anything at all within these ads. And they were actually offering a token as a gift. And that was just as a kind of a data capture exercise. And then they were going to send these people on a journey and ultimately make the ask at the end of that journey once that audience is warmed to us as a cause. So I think it very much depends on your aim in spending money on Facebook and what you actually want from it.
Yes. So I'm gonna ask the platform question now. Nobody's put this from the audience, but I've kind of felt it emerging as a result of our discussions, because we've had a little bit of comment about Facebook. Chiara, you've mentioned TikTok. There are other platforms out there as well, be it X, Instagram, and I guess niche platforms as well. Start with you, Jess. What do you view as the relative merits and demerits of different platforms, and what would you recommend?
We don't advertise on X, Mars Refugees. We didn't see success even before the change in ownership, and we've not continued with it for years now. We found people just don't tend to leave the platform, so it's not been a good recruitment platform for us. Instagram is far better. Instagram is where a lot of people are also sharing when they're taking part in our events. So Instagram tends to be our main one. We get a lot of people doing reels and things of their progress. So we saw that's where our audience is. And that's where we see the most success promoting. And across the wider meta as well, we do still get quite a lot from Facebook, but it has been trending more 60-40 towards Instagram. TikTok, we are working on, we've not seen broad success with it as a recruitment platform directly, but we have had some tracking issues with TikTok across our platform, to be honest. So there's been some issues really tracking conversions from TikTok. So this doesn't mean it's not necessarily, but we have seen similar behaviors than what we saw from Twitter, which is people are more reluctant to leave the app on TikTok. It is a very addictive app. So getting people to go to another site from TikTok we found more challenging, but again, asterisks on that, we've had some tracking issues. So yeah, those are the general ones for us.
Yes.
It is really great for engagement though, TikTok. It's really great to show on the day experiences of people and get people hyped.
Chiara, what are you recommending?
So our September challenges that we ran were the first time we promoted a challenge across all 4 of those social platforms. And we did actually see, success across all 4 of them. I think one of the biggest learnings was, and that we need to continue to work on, is that actually leads from each of those platforms require different communications and a different journey, and that's definitely something that we need to develop more. So where it might look like, for example, the X audience aren't engaging with our communications, it's likely that maybe our tone of voice or what we're asking of them or what we're communicating to them isn't right. We know that different people use and have a preference for different social platforms, and I think the next step, definitely for my team within virtual fundraising, is developing those journeys that aren't only bespoke to the supporter, like I mentioned earlier, but are actually bespoke to the source that supporter has come from, and really getting that right. And an example actually of that came from when I was working with Victoria on our September challenge. We did a 48-hour self-donation test as part of the reg flow, and we saw that generated that increased activation and overall average value for audiences from certain platforms, but it actually decreased it from audiences that came from other platforms. So that's just such a small example to show how the type of person who comes from a different platform could be so different, and they can respond to different things that you are communicating to them in very different ways.
Thanks. Victoria, what's your perspective on this?
Yeah, it's really not one size fits all, and that applies to every element of the fundraising funnel. It's lovely to see charities like Sans and teams like Chiara heads up trying things, testing things, and understanding where those nuances lie. It depends what reason they're on that platform for. You know, someone's going to be on LinkedIn to engage with very different content than they would be if they were on TikTok. So it's making sure that any creative, any messaging, like Chiara was saying, make sure that's tailored for the audience you're likely to find on that platform. And then it gets down even then to the registration flow. Don't offer everyone the same registration flow if they're all coming from different places. So like Jess said, like TikTok's really kind of fast and addictive and really quick. So give them a shorter registration flow. Like if you've managed to actually wean them off of TikTok and lure them away to a different site, don't keep them there for too long, like just filling in bits of data. Whereas, you know, for something like LinkedIn, if people want to be able to sync that up and be like, I actually want to acknowledge that I'm a business leader and I'm part of a global working community and I want some acknowledgement that I'm doing this really great thing, give them a different registration experience. Yeah, wherever you're fundraising, you should be able to add those different experiences into those different registration flows, and that should then flow into the supporter journey and the way you speak to people.
So I've kind of had a supplementary question on this from Will, saying, are a lot of charities moving away from X or Twitter? Jess, I know you've already said you're not using this anymore. But anybody have a broader perspective?
I mean, it's not the most popular channel from what we hear anecdotally to acquire from. But again, I'd say the people who we work with on these sorts of virtual challenges, again, they're not moving away from it. They're just tailoring their offering for X/Twitter. So whatever that looks like for the audience you're trying to acquire, make sure it actually works for that platform. And that can be a hard case to crack. So keep testing, keep trying. If it's really not worth it and you've got limited resources and budget, totally get that. In which case, don't worry, go where the money is. But if you think there is something out there, if you've got a good hunch that actually there could be a pool of people, keep trying different creative variants, copy variants, do what it takes to find where those people are on that platform.
I would say for us, sorry, Jess, Twitter is really, really cheap. So we're, you know, spending a lot less to get a lot more people. The difficulty comes later down the line and actually getting those people to register and to convert into an active fundraiser. So it's kind of like a different ball game really to the other social platforms that might be more expensive, but then you would typically see those higher conversion rates further down the funnel.
I'd say that we are still on Twitter as a charity. It's used more as a news function now, sharing updates about our work and particularly press releases on political issues and other ongoing things. The cause that our virtual events for Mars refugees is a very politicised one. It's quite unique in that, with a lot of virtual challenges. So we choose our platforms also depending on, it's the same audience consideration, but we have to remove ourselves from certain audiences because we know it not only doesn't work, but it leads to a negative response. So we have to consider it with that. And that, but as I said, even this isn't a new thing for Twitter. We didn't see huge success on it before for any of our challenges, but yeah, we've had to move off certainly now.
Yeah, I don't have a statistic. I think anecdotally there is some evidence that some charities are moving away from the platform for the kind of the the obvious toxic dialogue and discussion that sometimes happens in some areas of that platform. From my perspective, there's just the issue, I personally don't use it anymore as a platform at all because I just kind of found it too overwhelming and depressing. So I just decided for my mental well-being, I'm not going near it. So if other people are doing the same, it's obviously reducing your audience. So that's a very personal perspective. No statistics behind that. Want to keep moving along because we've got a few more questions. So another one relating to Facebook. So Facebook have made some recent changes, removing the fundraising and giving tools in the EU. And the question is, how likely are these changes to be applied to UK charities down the line? Do you have a view on this, Victoria?
I mean, that's the big question, isn't it? It's a very valid question, and I'm glad you guys are asking yourselves that. To be honest, I don't think anyone really saw the EU changes coming. That was a pretty big body blow. And we work with a lot of charities in the EU region who were very reliant on Meta fundraising. Happily, a lot of them have been able to switch to other platforms, including Funraisin, and maintained or increased that level of income. But it still had an impact just in terms of they had to sort themselves out and like gather those people and take them somewhere else. And the thing that really shone out from that was just the sheer amount of risk that charities were taking on. I don't know. I don't think anyone knows like the inner workings of Meta or how likely. I'm afraid I can't give you a hard and fast answer about if it's likely to happen in any other markets. The main advice I and Fundraising as a whole have really is consider that, you know, it's a possibility. And if it is a possibility, how exposed are you to that risk? You know, are all your eggs in one Facebook shaped basket? If so, consider the long term, you know, is that really sensible? Not to say that you move everything off it and panic and jump ship, but don't expose yourself to like so much risk that even if it just went down for the day, which it is not uncommon, you know, don't leave yourself open to that, you know, spread that risk as much as you can.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just wanted to add that we see fundraisers who fundraise across multiple fundraising pages have a significantly higher average value. And we also see our activation rates increase when we offer alternatives to Facebook fundraising. So from my perspective, there's no harm in ensuring that you are providing people with options when they're signing up to your event. One of those options can be Facebook fundraising. But if you're in a position where you're able to provide those options, should something happen to the Facebook fundraising tools, then you will not be as significantly affected as you would have been if you didn't already have an alternative set up.
Yeah, brilliant. Let's keep moving along. It's a bit of a different question here from Donna, who I think runs a charity. So Donna is asking, how can neurodiverse entrepreneurs of charities with digital platforms get help? Anybody have any ideas of sources of help?
I mean, I'd say if you see something you like or see something intriguing, like whether that's the platform, like certainly from Fundraising's perspective, please come and talk to us. We'd love to have a chat. We, as you say, we see a lot of charities do a lot of fundraising. We've got some great benchmarks and some insights and data that we can share. So go and just speak to the platforms that you see great things happening on. And also, I'm hoping these guys won't mind me saying, go and talk to the charities as well. It's one of the joys of being part of this sector is that it's very supportive. We are not a cutthroat group of people. It's broadly, I've found that if you ask, people are willing to share. But Jess and Chiara, I don't want to speak for you. So, you know, if you're shut for business, that's fine. But I know you guys have been very willing at other events we've been at to share your experience and insight with people.
Jess, anything to add?
Yeah, I'm always happy if people drop me a message. I've spoken with people, with colleagues at other organisations, and that's helped me an awful lot about events that I've never worked on before. There's also a lot of free information out there, free, you know, sort of conferences like this. There's Enthuse Reports. They do a really good data report on the wider virtual fundraising sector. There's multiple others as well. So yeah, there's free information and free workshops and things out there, I'd say, but also just, yeah, drop someone a message. I wouldn't say on LinkedIn, but my email address is fine.
Yeah.
I don't check LinkedIn as much as I should.
I would just echo what Jess and Victoria have said. Like, Virtual Challenges is a very supportive community. Contrary to Jess, I'd say LinkedIn is actually a great space. There's loads of people sharing so much insight, particularly on virtual challenges, on LinkedIn all the time, and not just individuals, but kind of agencies and consultants and things like that as well. So yeah, definitely get yourself on LinkedIn, read articles, attend webinars. There's a wealth of information out there.
I'm willing to admit that LinkedIn is a failure on my part.
Oh, me too.
enough.
I'm not as good as I should be.
I'm going to add a couple more on top as well. So there is the Digital Candle, and the Digital Candle offers free kind of 1 hour consultations for people from charities who have questions of a digital nature. Reach Volunteering is a platform for which you can advertise for volunteers. And CETA is another platform, a bit more IT focused rather than digital, but again, offers a route to volunteers. So a couple of recommendations there. Right, so coming towards the end now, but I've got one more question here. This is from Carl. Do you have any sense of whether or not an aging demographic shows any interest in migrating to the newer platforms? For example, is it worth encouraging Facebook followers to join or follow on Instagram or TikTok? And are there any obvious benefits in doing so?
Maybe. Yeah, it's worth considering. Like, you know, Facebook, when I was in school, was very much a young person's platform. It's really only in recent years that it's become people's parents and grandparents that are on there. You know, everything moves along, and that's the nature, is that people kind of get tired of something and leave it behind for someone else, and they move on to a new thing. So it's not to say that in 10 years' time we won't see octogenarians on TikTok. That's perfectly possible. So yeah, don't rule anything out. There's a surprising amount of varying demographics on each platform, and it's changing all the time. So keep your eyes peeled.
Yeah, it might take, if you want them to do it as a fundraiser, you have to acknowledge that you need to show them how. You need to let them know how to use these platforms if you want them to move. But yeah, absolutely. Just a personal example, I've got a family friend into his 70s, happily running his business through Instagram. There are people on different platforms as well. So I wouldn't say just assume age is the reason people aren't comfortable with platforms. There's people younger than me who don't understand lots about various platforms, or my age who don't understand the platforms. Many 30-year-olds don't understand TikTok. So yeah, don't assume age is the only reason, but yeah, just accept maybe if you want them to fundraise on a new platform, you're going to have to explain to them why, what the advantage is. But yeah.
Okay, good. So I guess as we're coming to the wrap up now, I think just one last question really. So we had the question about if people wanted to get started, what would you recommend? I guess as this is not a totally new area, quite a few of the people who are listening to this are probably already active in the space. So if you've got any last recommendations for people in terms of what they might do to up their game in the coming 12 months, what would you recommend? Start with Chiara on this.
So something that we've seen a lot of success with is an omni-channel approach to communication. So we use SMS, WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, Facebook groups, Strava groups, email, post, plus more as methods of communication to talk with our supporters. And we get very, very, very little criticism or complaint from supporters. And I think the reason for that is that by offering so many different channels of communication, we're giving our supporters choice with which they engage with. So yes, it sounds like a lot of communication is going out, but actually supporters will only read the ones that they want to read. And although within the industry, we love email, we all know that supporters are very unlikely to read all the hundreds of emails that you might send them over the course of a period of a challenge. So actually using communication channels that supporters themselves use to communicate with their families and friends has proven really successful for us. So our SMS journeys in particular, we see huge engagement rates with. I think for our September challenges, we sent over, I think, 7,000 text messages. And every one of those messages, people thought they were speaking directly with the officer on my team. And she got so many lovely messages from people at the end of the challenge, thanking her, because they genuinely felt like they'd formed a relationship with her. And in that relationship, you know, they're viewing that as a relationship with the charity as well and with the cause. So I would say, yeah, my tip would be to, you know, diversify your channels of communication and don't be afraid of using a variety of channels.
Yeah. Jess, what's your tip?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, but also make sure that you're communicating things that are relevant to people, and that what is relevant and you think is important might not be what is relevant and important to your supporters. We've been providing and testing on the kind of work that we share in our emails with supporters, for instance, to see what gets more engagement. And we've got a new audience strategy that's helping us better tailor our types of internal audience as to what areas of our work people want to hear about most, whether it's UK, whether it's international. But don't assume that everyone wants to hear about every single element of your work. People will likely have a very personal reason for supporting your charity. So make sure you're building in tests like that and you are meeting supporters and providing them with the content that they really want and can get excited for.
Yeah, good. And Victoria, what are your tips?
I'd say really get into that data, get your teeth in there. So really the big scary thing is like, oh God, there's so many things I could do, but don't try and do everything at once. Pick, if anything, one thing that you really want to improve on next year, and get into the data you've got. So is that the percentage of people making it through the registration flow, the percentage of people who go on to activate their fundraising page, the number of donations they're getting on their page. We've got benchmarks on all of this, so please drop me a line if you're interested. I'd be very happy to share those stats. And ultimately, if at any point you can't find that information or you don't have access to that data, then start there. Get yourself either talking to the people who have it or onto a platform that can provide it for you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. I'm afraid that's all we've got time for. We've had a really fascinating conversation here, and I'd really want to thank Victoria, Jess, and Chiara for their time. I think they've really helped us explore this area in a great deal of depth and had some great tips. So thank you very much.
Thank you. It's been lovely.
Thank you all.